Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of the Hashcast. It's special because it's going to be just me, because I had a cool week last week, and I was going to invite some people to talk about it, but not everybody was available, and it's about the Shadow of the Tomb Raider reveal event. So I went there in Montreal, and it was my first press reveal worldwide review game announcement, I guess, that I ever went to. So I was in Montreal. There was an event in London, and there was an event in LA. Now, most of my contacts and friends were at the LA event, and I was in Montreal, and I was hanging out with Jake Baldino from Game Ranks, and it was very cool to get to meet him and get to know him a little better, because we've met before. And I also hung out most of the night with Hip Hop Gamer, which I have a lot of stories about too, because he's a completely different person than I thought he was. So instead of just ignoring this whole event, and because I didn't have a guest lined up to talk about this, because my time has been a little difficult this week, because the event was in Montreal, I came back, and I have some guests over this week in the house, and I'm on the road all week next week. But I figured I'm just gonna try to see if I can run a solo show. It's probably not gonna be good, and it's gonna be audio only, as you have noticed by now if you're watching this on the YouTubes. If this even makes it to the YouTubes, I might just do SoundCloud. We'll see. Anyway, you're already listening to this, so you know more than I do at this point. So here's the. So I got invited by Square Enix, the PR manager there. Is Tara Bruno. I've known her for a while. She's a lovely person, and I ran into her at PAX. And she mentioned the then still secret event, which was the press reveal of Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And I was like, oh, what, you were doing in Montreal? And she was like, well, doing the thing. You should come. And I was like, oh, I'm absolutely going to be there, because I've never done one of those things before, and I wanted to see what that was like. So I drove to Montreal, went to the thing. Pretty overwhelming, I would say. It's impressive to walk into this giant hall that they rented out. It was an old nightclub. I think it's still a nightclub, but they rented it out for the night. And it was dressed up nice, and it had the fog machine and the jungle and the screens. They had drinks, food, like everything was taken care of. So it was very, very cool to be there. And if you've known me a little bit, my imposter syndrome immediately kicked in, of course. I was like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't deserve to be here. But I was. So I met up with Jake Baldino, and we were just hanging out. We had about a half an hour before the show started. And then we had an hour of hands-on with the game, which I'm going to talk about later. I wrote a piece about it, so if you already read this might be a little bit repetitive. If you have not read it, you can do it after, because it still has some cool detail in there that I probably won't be able to cover on sound only. So they brought out I think it was the creative director, or at least the head of one of the creative departments there, who gave us some insight on what the Tomb Raider trilogy was meant to be and what it became to be. And that was kind of cool, because it never really occurred to me that this was a trilogy setup. We had the reboot, which I thought was just a Shadow of the Tomb Raider 2013, and then of course we had Rise, which I was just assuming to be a sequel, and now we're getting into Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And I kind of made fun of the tagline, "Become the Tomb Raider," because, just like everybody else, like, oh, this is the third game. Isn't she already Tomb Raider by the end of 1, and definitely by the end of 2? But when he was explaining the path they had planned out for Lara, I'm not sure how my accent sounds like this when I speak her name, Lara. What they had in mind for her. So when I saw the progression, which was kind of cool because they put the cover art of all 3 games next to each other, and then they point out little details that I completely missed when I saw them first. Because in the first, I'm not sure if you remember, you can probably look this up. The cover is Lara in the cave, and she's bandaging herself. And they point out, like, look here, she's quite vulnerable, but if you look at her face, she's still determined. And at the second one, Rise of the Tomb Raider, in the storyline, she's actively pursuing her enemies in that one. But that's the first one where she starts to really go after the artifacts that she needs, and she's tackling a couple of more tombs. So she was confident, but or prepared, confident, but kind of out of her depth still. Now in the third one, I'm not sure if you've seen the picture yet. It's Lara sitting in a tree with her knife and her bow, and in the background there's this solar eclipse going. Like, she is not the bad guy, but she's the threat. Like, she's obviously a threat, and if you've seen the trailer, like, she's got a lot of tricks up her sleeve. So she has completed the path. Like, she is at her prime, I would say, in the third one, and that's when she truly becomes the Tomb Raider, despite having some practice in the first 2. After the third game, or pretty much during the first game, she is the Tomb Raider that we've known for all this time without the backstory. So that started to make a little bit more sense. And which it's always cool for me to see the creators talk about what they've created, because there's a lot of work that goes into these things, and to see them on stage and have presenting them for the first time, because this was truly a preview that they got to do before an audience. Like, this was the first time people were actually seeing and playing the game. So I assume that's a big deal, because it's like 100 people working on these things, and they're putting their baby out into the world. So there's always a lot of passion and that hope, that sparkle of hope that people are gonna love it. So that was a good introduction, and then we went into the trailer and some of the more background. And what I didn't really mention in the piece that I wrote on this was that how much extra they put into this game. So underwater traversal was a bit of a thing in Rise, but it seems to be a lot bigger here in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Even in the first level that I got to play, there was a significant chunk that took place underwater, and it was well done underwater. It was not annoying underwater, it was just pretty well done. And what they were promising was that the tombs were going to be the best tombs we've ever seen, and basically that everything and everyone in the tomb is out there to kill you. And I've seen some of the screenshots that we're not allowed to share, but oh boy, do they have some stuff in store for you. Think spikes, hammers, swings, and all the good stuff. Kind of reminded me of the first couple of games, with the spikes coming out of the walls and out of the floors to get you. So that's going to be promising. Like, they really promised that they were going to be the deadliest tombs we've ever seen. So that's definitely a step up from where we are currently. And I think that drives home the becoming the Tomb Raider part of the game as well. So I got to play the game for an hour, but I also got to talk to the lead writer of the game. So by combining all these things, the presentation and the gameplay, and talking to the writer, Jill Murray, gave me a pretty good idea on what this game is going to be. Like, I can't really just use the hands-on hour to say, okay, this game is going to be fantastic. Like, what I've played was good, and I'm going to go into detail into that a little further. But if you're excited about Shadow of the Tomb Raider, or just any Tomb Raider game, like, I think this is going to be a very safe bet. It's going to be a game easy to enjoy, But let's talk about the gameplay a little bit. And when I say gameplay, it's more like the experience that I had, not necessarily like, oh, you press X to jump or Y to do a stealth attack, but just the real impression I got in the hour hands-on that we did, because there's a lot there. And the section that I played apparently took place about 15 minutes in, so it's very, very much in the beginning. But you kind of go in without context, but I'm assuming there is maybe an introduction there, or maybe a couple of cutscenes. But they so I hope I think I can talk about all this. Whatever, it's too late now. So you start off in what appears to be Mexico on the Day of the Dead. You're hanging out with Jonah, which is he's been your friend throughout the previous 2 games, and you're trying to find either the leader of the Trinity organization, and if you remember that or not remember that, those are the guys that Laura thinks are responsible for the death of her father, and you spend most of the second game fighting those guys. So I'm not sure what the entry point is there, that because they are looking for something and you're looking for the same thing, and they might be almost at the point where they found the entrance to a tomb. So Lara and Jonah are kind of eavesdropping on a bunch of dudes, and the game kicks off and they say, okay, we found it, you have to come check this out. So you go into a slow walk mode, Lara, through the crowd to see where these guys are going. And the game looks great. Like I think what I played was not 100% polished. There was a little bit of jitter here and there, a little bit of clipping, but we'll see. Like I don't know at this point. But overall, it looked fantastic. Like people react to your movement. They kind of look at you when you walk by. Like you feel that you are an actual object in the space in this world. So that's always kind of cool to see. Like I know it's nothing new. Like Uncharted did that years ago, but it's nice to see, because in the previous Tomb Raider games you did not have a lot of interaction with NPCs or anyone really. Then if you weren't actively murdering them. So that's cool to have a little bit of a slow build-up, although there is probably some of you that absolutely hate the forced slow walking through the crowd, eavesdropping, getting the stories. But it's there. I thought it was a nice introduction to the characters. And it, like, I'm not sure how sensitive you are to spoilers, because I'm going to talk about the first hour of the game. But it's important at that point that you see the characters, that you meet the NPCs, because it's going to come back later at the end of the first hour. Like there's little boys selling firecrackers. There's some people paying their respects to their loved ones. A man specifically mourning his wife, and he mentioned that they never made it to their honeymoon. So they place these little tidbits of interesting pieces for you to put together. But what I noticed, that it was not a requirement for me to progress. So it was not that I was looking for a specific conversation in the crowd that I had to listen to before I could move to the next section of the game. It was all window dressing. So you follow the guys. Jonah distracts a bunch of people. You climb over the fence, and then you stealthily, is that a word? I don't know. It's a word now. Follow the bad guy, which, according to Lara, might not just be the head of this cell, but might be the head of this entire organization, Trinity, that they've been chasing for a couple of games now. So you move him along, and you see how the man interacts with his environment, and he's not super bad. Like he seems to treat his staff with a level of respect. This kid bumps into him and falls, and he takes care of the kid, not knowing he's being followed, obviously. And I kind of like that they didn't make him this obvious cartoon villain. But Lara just like wants his head like off the bat, and like I said, I might have missed the context and the opening of the game, but that's the setup for that. Now, don't worry, I'm not gonna do a whole play-by-play of what I played, but the context is important to give you a good idea on why this demo worked for me, because it really did. So you chase the dude around. They do add a little bit of, these are absolutely the bad guys, so please don't feel bad for slaughtering them in the next hour, because they show you how they found this local archaeologist that has run out of use to the organization, so he's being put in the back, and then someone is threatening to shoot him, but he's doing so much threatening that Lara has enough time to, and that's when you get into control of your bow and arrow to take him out. And then he goes, "Oh no, I'm gonna go see my sister and warn them, because these are obviously the bad guys, so please don't feel bad." And that's when you get to go on your little adventure murder spree. So you find the entrance to the cave they've been looking for. There's a couple of new elements here. It's almost identical to the first couple of games. Like, you have your climbing axe, you have your walls that you can clearly jump to, you have your white ledge walls and edges where you can climb on. Like, that's all there. The new thing is that you can rappel down when you're hanging off some of the cliffs. So that's kind of cool, but it's just another way to do traversal in this game. So you go into the cave, you get your... it's a good looking, interesting tomb that they put you in. Like, traps are there. I found them relatively obvious, because you see a rope running around the floor, and then you can cut it with your knife, and if you don't, you get like impaled. But there's a lot of visual clues. Like, the first trap you encounter already has the spikes out with a body through it, so the game has some interesting ways to let you know what's going on and what's expected of you to beat these tombs. Anyway, so you go through the whole thing. You do your little mini puzzles. There are some rope puzzles there. One of the puzzles took me quite some time, because either I was being an idiot or I just didn't see it right. Where I had to spin a wheel anyway, like, that's all there. Like, the Tomb Raider stuff, right? But the story is pretty interesting, I find. So when Lara completes the first tomb, she finds this artifact, and the writing is literally on the wall on what this is about. Like, it's about the Mayan apocalypse that's being set off, and she thinks that the bad guys that she has announced as the bad guys are about to set off the apocalypse unless she stops it. So she finds the artifact, takes it, and then the moment she takes it, she triggers something. You feel the tremor, and the stones come falling down. And what I found interesting is when she takes the artifact, it is her that actually sets this apocalyptic scenario in motion, because she takes the thing. So she probably just beat the bad guys to the punch because she was there first, but it's still her that does this. So when you go out, all shit breaks loose. All hell breaks loose. Shit hits the fan. I don't know. You catch what I wanted to say. So all the alarm bells go off, and all the bad guys are out to stop Lara. And then at that point, you can unlock all your entire arsenal. Now, I'm not sure if that was a thing that the demo had, because I had access to machine gun, shotgun, handgun, bow, all the things. It might be that you have to collect this on your own when you're playing through the full game. So I did the first part stealthy, because the game kind of wants you to do it the stealthy way, like don't cause any alarms, and you have to get out of here unseen, blah blah blah. And I think that's where it starts to get really cool, and you get to really see how Lara is. She's just a beast, man. Like, you slide down in the beginning and you land in a mud pit. So she comes out of the mud and she's like covered, and it's like the movie Predator. And then you hide in the vines against the wall. Dude walks by and you just stab him like a bunch of times with your big knife. And she's really good at killing all these people. So you go through the game, do your stealth takedowns, and one is more brutal than the previous one. So, she's really having it out for these guys. But at some point, I saw a couple of red barrels, because the red barrels are in the game, and I switched to my shotgun, which triggered a save point. So after that, I always had to start from a high alert combat scenario, because I did die a couple of times, because I was just Ramboing it, which is clearly not a super good strategy. But it's there. There's no reason that you have to do it stealth. You probably get more points for it if that's your thing. But it's cool. She's very capable. So I wiped out all the dudes, and then I get caught by the bad guy, and he basically tells you like, "Hey, you did this," and Lara has a lot of trouble accepting that she might have done something that she didn't study it enough, she didn't know what she was doing, and now she caused this chain of events, and while you're defending yourself in a way, a tsunami happens. So the bad guy gets in his helicopter just before he flies off, because there's a second artifact that they need to remake the world in whatever image they choose. And he mentioned something that he's going to create a world without weakness and sin. Now, when you say without weakness and sin, that could easily be like several interpretations of that. It could be that only the high and mighty get to live and rule, or it could be like that there is no more sin committed, and that everybody's strong. So they've deliberately leave that a little bit in the middle. But then tsunami hits, and then all of a sudden you see all those people that you meet in the beginning of the game, and I think that's why it was important, get hit with the water. The market floods, there's bodies everywhere, the whole town gets destroyed, and it's your fault, because you triggered this. But Lara is still so focused on her being right and her quest for vengeance that she kind of brushed it off. And when you make your way through the tsunami to get to high ground, the game really makes a point to show you the consequences of your actions. And in the presentation, they mentioned it a couple of times, like this game leans in hard on consequences to your actions. And one of the biggest thing is that you see a kid hanging from the edge of a building, like screaming for his life, and while you get closer, he falls into the water and is not to be seen again. And that is the kid that it's kind of he has a sort of like a red ribbon through the opening scene where you see him a couple of times, and that's where his story ends, I guess. And I asked the writer, like, is that the same kid? And they confirmed, yeah. Wow, that's a nice catch, but it is the kid. So they're really trying to kind of drive it home. Like, hey, you did this. In you're like a one issue party at this point in your quest for revenge, and you're overseeing all the suffering you caused by just getting what you want. So I found it very, very interesting to put a protagonist through that, and I'm curious to see how far they're gonna take that, because of course when you beat the level, you meet up with Jonah, your friend, and he's he's kind of mad at you, but he also tells you, well, you don't know for sure if it's your fault, and you're so self-centered that you think that everything is about you, and he wants to stay and save the people. But Lara, all she wants to do is chase the bad guys and get the next artifact to stop them, because according to her, she's the only one who can stop them, and she's the only one who's right. Well, the game clearly tries to tell you, or at least pretends to tell you, that the bad guy might not necessarily be a bad guy. It might just be a different perspective on doing the right thing. And that's where the demo ends, with the drama between Jonah and Lara. But I found that very interesting. And what I heard later on when I was talking to the lead writer is, if you see the trailer, it ends with Lara standing on the top of the pyramid, overlooking like 1,000 people. And I asked, like, when does this moment take place in the timeline of the game? And she said, well, actually, it's not necessarily a point in the game. She might be just spinning a tail on me to not give away too much. But she told me like that the whole trailer kind of shows what Lara could be, and it's a bit of a nightmare scenario for her. So maybe what it's trying to show is that when left unchecked, this is what she could become. And the tone I got from that is that is not what Lara necessarily wants for herself. So I'm not sure where they're going with that. It could be interesting. It could be a little, video gamey. It depends on how they play it. But I did get a pretty good impression from the lead writer. That she definitely had some cool plans for Lara on this, and how she really tried to make her as human as possible, and put a spotlight on her flaws here and there. So we'll see. We'll have to see what that game is going to be. Game-wise, it plays fine. It looks great, and I really like where they appear to be going with the story. So that was a cool thing to do, and to get those hands-on impressions. But I also kind of wanted to talk about just what it's like to be invited to these things. I'm not sure if this is interesting for you at all, but if you're, maybe trying to get into this, then it might be fun to hear. Whatever. Otherwise, you can tune out because you had your impressions. Thanks so much for listening. But now I'll talk about that a little bit as well. So, like I said in the beginning, it is very overwhelming, because they really try to make you feel like a rock star, and that definitely helps. But it's I love getting that glimpse into the industry where you get direct access to the devs, because they really invited a lot of the developers. It wasn't just the top suites. It was everybody from artists to coders to programmers. Like the whole bunch was there, and they were when we were playing, they were kind of standing behind us, looking at us play, and you could just see them feeding off the reactions of the players. So that was pretty cool to see, because I think most of the people that played it had a pretty good reaction to it. So just to see their faces light up when someone turned around going like, wow, that was awesome. That was very, very, very cool. And what I like about these things is that I get to talk to my peers. Most of them way more experienced than I am. And I tweeted about this early after, is what was important to me. What came out of this event was, sometimes I struggle a little bit, like am I good enough for this? Like, do I belong, and do I deserve these kind of opportunities? But when I started reading the impressions that most other people did, like the professional outlets, I noticed that the piece I wrote kind of hit the same notes that everybody else was doing. So for me, it was a good opportunity to get that confidence in my own ability. So that was great. So I was really grateful that I got to do it for that part. But the other part was just hanging out, because that's where the magic happens. You get to talk to all these people. And like I said, Jake Baldino, super nice guy. I met him before, but now we had some time to get to know each other a little bit better, because he is an expert. Like, he has done so much in like the YouTube world and the video blogs. So I had an opportunity to learn from him a lot over the hours we spent. We went for dinner, and it was just a good time. And I'll definitely get him on the Hashcast soon, because he's willing to work with me. So that's good news. And I also met with a hip hop gamer, which I have seen before. Like, I've seen him at E3 a couple of times. I've seen him at PAX, but I never had the opportunity to talk to him. So because this was a very like a little intimate event, because there were like 100 people there, everybody was talking to everybody, and he and Jake probably knew each other, because he came to us and talked. And if you ever seen Hip Hop Gamer, he's the guy that walks around with the big wrestling belt. Like, wherever he goes, he has this big wrestling belt over his shoulder. And so the first time when I saw him, didn't talk to him, I was like, okay, that's clearly a gimmick. Like how my cat was my gimmick, that was his. And he has his entourage. So, but now he didn't have any of it. He still had the belt. So when I got to talk to him, I got to see the belt from up close, and what was such a pleasant surprise to see was that on his belt he has his name and all the games that meant a lot to him growing up. And then he has a picture of his grandmother, 2 pictures of his grandma on the belt, when she was young and when she was a little older, because his entire love for gaming came from his grandmother, who used to play with him when he was a kid. So there was such a little thing that I appreciate out of these kind of events, that you get to meet these faces, these characters that we've seen on YouTube and online and on Twitter, and you get to have a glimpse in the personalities behind them. So overall, if you ever get an invite for one of these things, absolutely go, because first of all, you get to play the game before it comes out, and you get to have the insight to the devs, you get to talk to the devs, you get to interview them, and you get to meet your peers, which is just a very pleasant experience. So that was cool. Like, I had a lot of fun, and I wanted to talk about it, but would have been cooler if I could have it back and forth, but the timeline, the stars did not align when we talk about press events, and I had to go see Infinity War. And I'm gonna try to do a spoiler cast on that next week, because I have a few people that are dying to talk about that. So I'll set that up. But like I said, I'm gonna be on the road all week next week, so I'm not sure how that's gonna work, but we're gonna make it work. And I bought a Switch. Today. I buckled, which is weird, because I've been thinking about buying a Switch for quite some time now, but I never really got around to it, and every time I almost made that purchase, I got buyer's remorse even before I even went out to get it. But because I have a big trip next week, I figured, what the hell, I'll just go buy it. I bought a Switch with Mario Odyssey, which I hope was a good choice, because I'm not a super big Mario fan. But out of all the games they had available, because I kind of live in the boonies, so I was happy to find one. And they had some games. Kind of maybe thinking I should have gotten Mario and Rabbids, but at least my wife likes Mario, so she can play as well when we're on the plane tomorrow. So we'll see. I will talk about my Switch experiences in the future, and hopefully I enjoy this. I'm gonna download some Stardew Valley on this thing, so you might never see me again. But if you have any recommendations for me on the stuff I need to play on the Switch, let me know, and I will definitely look into that and download those things as well. Got a couple of things coming up. Like I said, spoiler cast coming up. I have a couple of guests that I think you will find interesting to get on the show as well. But sometimes life happens, and people are not always directly available. But we'll see. E3 coming up. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be there. It doesn't seem like I'll be there, at least. unless some unexpected stuff happens, but I don't think so. So I'll be joining it with you guys online, watching reactions and eating snacks from the bed while eating more snacks and looking at E3 pressers. So it's gonna be good. It's gonna be a good time. It's gonna be hopefully I'll have a couple more good episodes coming up, because this is the last one of the month. If you're still listening to me ramble by myself, I really appreciate all the support that I've been getting from you guys, especially those on Patreon, of course. Like, you guys are specifically amazing. I don't know if I've earned it this month, but because it's been a little crazy, but I feel like it's getting we're getting to where I want to be. Although I've had a couple of outsider episodes already. I hope I'm getting better at it. At least we'll see. We'll see. I'll let you be the judge of that. So thank you so much for tuning in to this weird solo episode. I hope that was an interesting story to listen to. I'm not sure. Maybe the written part was all you needed, but maybe you just like listening to my dumb Dutch voice. Then you're free to do that. I think. I mean, you pay for it, so you can do whatever you want. So that's it for this episode. If you are listening to this on the podcast, iTunes, Stitcher programs, you can find me on Twitter at the Hashtagonist, where the O in the end is a 0. And you can find me on patreon.com/thehashtagonist as well. And drop by and leave me some words of either encouragement or advice, and I'll see what I can do with it. And otherwise, I'll hopefully see you next week. It might go up a little later because I won't be back until Saturday. But I have my peeps lined up to talk about Infinity War, so I hope that works out. And we'll talk soon. Thank you. Bye.